It's my duty to summarize the conference. But with 1,400 participants, 150 workshops, a couple of dozen plenary speakers, that's an absolutely impossible task. So maybe I'll do something a little different. I'll try to answer a question I got earlier in the week from a manager who was here. Couldn't really answer it then, I was rushing off to a workshop, but I'm going to take a crack at it now, and maybe that can serve as a summary. The question was, we know what you guys, meaning the union, are against. We've made that pretty clear. But what are you for? What do steelworkers and CWA really believe about health and safety? What do we really want? What's our overall philosophy? It's pretty simple. First, we think the preeminent goal of a safety and health program should be to find and fix hazards. Things like unguarded machinery, toxic chemical exposures, the possibility of explosive vapors. We don't think there's a shortcut to that. We think you do it by gaining a detailed understanding of the workplace and the production process, and then applying a number of tools. Hazard mapping to begin with, then a rigorous audit program that looks for all the things that can go wrong or are going wrong, and can therefore cause an injury. We call that looking for trouble. Because if we don't find trouble through a workplace audit, trouble will surely find us when somebody is injured or killed. We think workers are essential to that. When we've gone back and looked at fatalities, a majority happen under unusual circumstances, upset conditions. Something broke at 3 in the morning and they wanted to get the plant back in production, and they threw 3 maintenance workers at it, and that job went wrong. Nobody knows about those conditions better than the people who are doing those jobs. So workers are essential to finding and fixing hazards. You also need a good program for investigating accidents. Near misses, process upsets. That's the way you learn what can go wrong. It's something that the USW's top program that we've heard about, the Triangle Prevention Program, does so well. It's based on that kind of investigation. We would commend that program to any local union and to any management. Now, because you need to investigate all of the accidents, incidents, injuries, near misses, upsets, it stands to reason that you want them all reported. Therefore, it stands to reason that we're against any program that rewards workers for not reporting such events or punishes them for doing so. We've talked about such programs a lot at this conference. Programs where injured workers get disciplined for violating a work rule that's meaningless. I've seen people disciplined for not keeping their eyes on task. I've seen people disciplined for, quote, carelessness, unquote. Saw one brother who was disciplined for, who sprained his ankle in a darkened hallway, no light at all, and a broken handrail. They disciplined him for not being aware of the position of his feet. We actually won that one in the third step when he said, I don't know what this is. I knew where my feet were all the time. They were on the end of my legs. We didn't have to take that to arbitration for him, fortunately. We're against programs where everybody involved in an accident gets drug tested, regardless of whether they did anything that may have caused or contributed to the accident. I worked on one case where a guy coming off shift went to the company parking lot, pulled his car out of his parking space, wasn't real careful, and ran into another car that was properly parked in a proper parking space. That car was owned by a clerical worker who worked a different shift schedule, was at work at the time in an office, company office. They drug tested the worker who pulled his car out. They also drug tested the other worker whose car was the one hit. How does that make any sense? But that was the company's program. That sort of thing drives reporting underground. We're against so-called positive incentive programs where you get a jacket or a pizza or a raffle ticket if you don't report an injury. First, they don't work. Second, they're insulting. Their message to workers is, you're too dumb to care about safety unless we bribe you. That doesn't mean we're against rewards. We're for rewards. But give them for the best safety suggestion. Give them for the best performance on an audit. As you've seen, we gave a lot of awards at this conference. We didn't give any based on injury rates. Now, everybody in the room knows we don't like behavioral safety. Why is that? We think it's a cheap way to avoid doing what really needs to be done, finding and fixing hazards. And it doesn't work. Do we teach people to tiptoe through the minefield, or do we clear the mines? Look at the example of World Kitchen, where a company abandoned a behavioral safety program when it founded a program aimed at hazards, and fixing hazards was much more effective. In addition, we don't like the word behavior. Oh, it sounds very professional and very social science-y, but it immediately conveys a negative impression. Remember when we were kids, Mom and Dad said, "I want to talk about your behavior." It was never a good thing. Interestingly, behavioral psychology will tell you not to use words that put people off. But that's exactly what behavioral safety does, which shows you how little science there really is in the enterprise. And that brings me to what I think is the biggest problem with behavioral safety. It sends workers the message that they are the problem. And we are never going to truly make progress unless we understand that workers are the solution. That no safety program will ever succeed unless it enlists the skill, the knowledge, the dedication of the entire workforce. And how can any program succeed if it starts by blaming the very people who are essential to its success? Okay, we're against behavioral safety. What are we for? Does our opposition to behavioral safety really mean we don't care about how people do their jobs? Of course, we want people to work as safely as possible. We think the way to do that, and what we're for, is to attack the things that make it hard to work safely. Fatigue due to excessive involuntary overtime, poor training, poor instrumentation, excessive or conflicting job demands. We have to make it possible for people to do the job safely, because we believe that people want to do the job safely. A few years ago, we did a major survey in 4 of our steel plants. We asked people, have you ever done an unsafe job, knowing it was unsafe? Incidentally, that survey had several thousand people in it, and we had a better than 90% response rate. Pretty big survey. We asked people, have you ever done an unsafe job, knowing it was unsafe? A majority said yes. Then we asked why. 60% said there was no other way to do the job except to do it unsafely. That's a hell of a finding. It means that either we haven't found a way to make those jobs safe, or we haven't communicated it. And in looking at people doing their jobs safely, we have to remember that we're all human. We will sometimes be tired, distracted, confused, preoccupied, clumsy. We can reduce mistakes to a minimum, and we should, but there will still be mistakes. We have to create workplaces that will forgive the occasional mistake, because try as we will, and try as we must, to reduce mistakes to a minimum, they will still happen. Technically, that's called the Failsafe Principle. You've heard the word failsafe. It doesn't refer to a system that doesn't fail. It refers to a system that, when it fails in a safe manner. The power supplied to elevator brakes hold the brakes open. If the power fails, the brakes clamp shut and the elevator stops. That's a fail-safe system. Accelerator in your car is a fail-safe system. Take your foot off the accelerator, the car comes to a halt. We have to create workplaces that, as much as possible, embody the fail-safe principle, so that if one thing goes wrong, if one person makes a mistake, it's not going to get you killed. That brings me to discipline. Some companies think the way to reduce mistakes is to discipline everybody who makes one. It's about the worst thing you can do. We need to investigate mistakes, find out why they occur, not drive them underground where nobody is willing to risk reporting them. There's a place for discipline, where there's malicious intent, outright and knowing defiance, utter recklessness. I don't think that happens very long. I'm sorry, I don't think that happens very often. I haven't seen a lot of examples of that. You can't discipline your way to safety. A few more things we believe in. We believe in OSHA and MSHA and their Canadian equivalents. We recognize that many employers, maybe even most employers, would do the right thing voluntarily, even if those agencies did not exist. But the problem with voluntary programs is that not everybody volunteers. Not every employer volunteers, whereas every worker deserves a safe workplace. By the way, we don't believe OSHA standards cost jobs, despite all that we are hearing about the cost of regulation. Every example we know of an OSHA regulation has created jobs. We believe in protecting the environment. The environment outside the workplace is just an extension of the environment inside. And the environment isn't just birds and bunnies and trees. It's the basic safety and health of everybody who breathes the air and drinks the water. And just like OSHA standards, environmental quality and the need to protect it creates jobs and has created literally millions of jobs over the last 2 decades. More than anything, we believe that workers and their union should have a role, should have a place, should participate fully in the work of making jobs safe and in the work of protecting our communities and our environment. We believe that's essential to the job of health, safety, and environment. But even more fundamentally, we believe it's a matter of basic worker rights or basic human rights. We know how to fight for our rights. We've had lots of practice. You've heard some good examples this week. But we also know how to work together in partnership with employers who are committed, like us, to commit to creating the safest workplaces possible. You've heard examples of that too. And that's what we will always prefer, and that's what this conference is about. Let me ask you all a question. Do you think so far it's been a successful conference? Well, thanks for that. I think we've had some great speakers. We've had some great workshops. But I disagree. I don't think we know enough to say yet whether it's been a successful conference. I think the test of that is not what happens this week, but what happens next week and the week after and the week after. This will only be a successful conference if we take what we've learned, and we've all learned, take it back to our workplaces, apply it, make our workplaces the safest and healthiest places they can possibly be. That's the measure of success. Thank you.